Lesson 1.6. This is the last part of Lesson 1, and we're ready to make our first bar of soap. Now this will be the simplest recipe in the entire course. And once you finish with Lesson 1, the recipes and decorations become more complicated, and your ability to be creative with your artwork really starts to grow. But for now, I want to demonstrate a more basic bar of soap so you can see just how simple the process really is. This bar will have no colorant, no fragrance, and only one oil. We'll be using the cold process method to make this bar. Now, even though the final product is pretty plain, the completed result will produce a completely fine bar of soap that you can set on the kitchen sink. First, let's go over to the soap calculator and put together a recipe and get the measurements. We'll be making a small 8-ounce batch, so let's make sure that our calculator is set to ounces. We'll leave everything else as it is and go straight down to the oils. Let's add lard to our oil and set this to 100%. Click Calculate Recipe and View to Print. Now we instantly know our measurements. This recipe will need 8 ounces of oil, 1.12 ounces of lye, and 3.04 ounces of water. So let's get started. First, let's gather our utensils and supplies. You'll need bowls and spoons, a thermometer, your scale, your gloves and your glasses. Make sure you put on your gloves and your glasses before you open the lye. Now, we'll make our lye water exactly the same way that we made it in the previous lesson. Remember, you always add the lye crystals into the water, not the other way around. Stir this down well and allow all those crystals to dissolve. We're going to check the temperature. Right now, it's way too hot for this to be turned into soap. We need to set this aside and let it cool. Next, we'll measure out 8 ounces of lard. Now, some oils are in solid form at room temperature. You'll need to melt this in the microwave and get it into a liquid form. You can use short hot bursts in the microwave, or you could set this into a simmering hot bath over your stovetop. However you prefer to work with your oils is entirely up to you. Just make sure that you give it just enough heat to melt the oil and don't scorch or burn that oil in the process. Now, microwaves are all different, so it does work best if you go in about 5 to 10-second intervals, and that way you won't put too much heat on that oil. Lard is very obvious when it gets too hot. It smells like cooking bacon, and boy, if that smell starts heating up, you will know it. So this way we can melt our oils down very nicely. And by the way, when your soap cures, it's not going to smell like bacon. That smell will go away. Now your lye must be cooled down before you mix it in with the oil. You want to make sure that you mix your oils and your lye solution when both temperatures are close to 110 degrees. Pour the lye solution into your oil and blend this with the stick blender thoroughly. You'll notice that the solution quickly turns creamy with a pancake batter texture. We want to keep blending until all the molecules of lye and oil have found a partner and they bond together. Keep an eye on the surface of the liquid. Look for a greasy sheen right on the top of the batter, and if you see this, you need to keep blending. This batter will start to morph into a texture that we call trace. This is where it thickens up and turns into something that looks like pudding. Lift the stick blender out of the batter and try to trace a line across the surface. If this happens for you, you've reached trace. Now the length of time that it takes for your batter to thicken varies depending on your oils and other additives that may be put into your recipe later on. Some recipes will become thick very quickly, while others take several minutes to completely emulsify and start to develop a trace. Now this is where you'll start to tweak your recipe ingredients depending on how much time that you need to work with your soap. For this soap recipe, we're going to transfer our soap batter into these cute little pumpkin molds. We want the batter to stay relatively thin so that it'll flow into the shape of the mold easily. Once the soap is poured, we're going to set this aside and leave it alone so that it can firm up over the next 24 hours, and then we'll come back and unmold it later. Now here, I'm going to keep this warm and insulate this soap by putting a piece of cardboard over the top, and then I'll add some kitchen towels around it. You'll learn more about insulation in lesson 2. Once this is firm, we're going to pop our soap out of the molds, and here's the final product. These cute little bars are still a little bit soft, and although our work is done, these are not ready to be used yet. When the soap is made with the cold process method, it must be set aside to cure. Now, during the curing process, any lye molecules that never found a partner will end up dying off. And there'll be excess water in this bar. That still needs to be evaporated, and this will take some time. The soap will become harder, and over time, it also becomes more gentle. Curing can take anywhere from 3 to 8 weeks, and this bar will be ready to use in about 3 weeks. So far, you know that as long as all of your oils have been completely saponified, there's no longer any oil left in the product, but instead it's changed completely into soap. So why then do you see recipes that call for different oils? Why don't they all just produce the same product? Well, they do all produce soap, but the properties of your soap will be different, and you'll want to craft your recipe depending on the type of bar that you're making. So let's take a look at some of these examples. In the next lesson, you'll be working with both hard oils and soft oils. Hard oils are solid at room temperature, while soft oils are liquid at room temperature, and they'll produce either a hard or a soft bar of soap. And you'll want the finished product to be somewhere in between, which is why we blend a combination of oils. Now here is a piece of soap made from 100% lard, as shown from the earlier demonstrations, and we'll compare that to some soaps made with other oils. Here's a piece made from coconut oil and a piece made from 100% olive oil, also known as Castile soap. And finally, here's a piece made from 100% soybean oil, which I wouldn't recommend. It's very light and it makes a very soft soap. Now watch what happens when we cut into each bar. The lard soap, it's very brittle and it crumbles when I cut into it. Now it won't be possible to cut this from a large loaf mold if it's been left to cure for too long. Olive oil is also hard and brittle when it's cured, although these are commonly made in loaves and cut. But this one may take up to 3 months to cure, so it's not difficult to get this sliced after you've made it. Coconut oil is also a little bit hard and brittle, and it doesn't feel too nice on your skin if you're making just 100% coconut oil. It's actually very drying. And finally, our vegetable oil soap is very different. This is soft, and it smudges easily. Matter of fact, this piece is so soft that it would melt on a hot day and turn into a blob if you leave it in a sunny windowsill. And this is why you might want to blend your oils together when you're crafting a cold process recipe. The right balance of oils will give you just the right texture and stability for your bar so that you can feel nice, and it'll also be sturdy enough to last for a really long time. So this tutorial completes lesson 1, and now we're ready to start crafting our recipes with a combination of oils that will give us exactly what we want. Now it's time to begin lesson 2.